to Novel Sweets and Spirits on the Green. This is Michelle Bretsky of Momo Maes Bakery, our kind hostess. We want to thank Longmont Liquors, who supplies our complimentary beer and wine. I want to thank you all for coming. Each week I perform an episode of a novel called Blame It on Hoboken, and I'll give you the intro to what that is. And if you have any questions at halftime, we can catch up on there. But this is our theme song that we play every week, kind of the way a TV show has a theme song, and it's called Blame It on Hoboken. Blame it on the season, blame it on the weather, oh, blame it for no reason. On a feather, you can blame it on Hoboken, but baby, stay with me. You can blame it on the game, blame it on the batter, oh, blame it on my name. It doesn't matter, you can blame it on Hoboken, but baby, stay with me. The magic kicks off Saturday night when your ferry pulls in from Brooklyn Heights. All the gangplank's down, the love bug bites, the skyline spells forever. As long as we're together, you can blame it on a fish, blame it on the ocean, oh, blame it on this kiss. If you get the notion, you can blame it on Hoboken, but baby, stay with me. Off Saturday night when your ferry pulls in from Brooklyn Heights. All the gangplank's down, the love bug bites, the skyline spells forever. As long as we're together, you can blame it on a fish, blame it on the ocean, oh, blame it on this kiss. If you get the notion, you can blame it on Hoboken, but baby, stay with blame it on Hoboken, but baby, stay with blame it but don't tame it. Write our names in flames with it, no 2 days the same on it. Stake a claim for fame on it, blame it on Hoboken, but baby, stay with me. Blame It on Hoboken, Episode 7. We start with a recap of Episode 6. In last week's episode of Blame It on Hoboken, Carolyn Cates, a tour guide who specializes in overlooked landmarks, has hired Jimmy Foss, a tough-talking matchmaker from Hoboken, to help her find the most normal man in New York City. And she's doing this on a deadline. Carolyn is great at her job. She's great at finding landmarks that other people overlook. But when it comes to dating, she hasn't had the best run of luck. And so she has decided on the rebound from her last relationship to use Euclid's formula of perfect numbers as her guide to dating. And what this formula says, ancient mathematical formula, is that a prime number times a square number equals a perfect number. And Carolyn has interpreted this to say that a perfect number must be true love. And she's in her prime. She's 31 years old. And so clearly what she's missing, what she needs, is a square. She needs a totally normal guy. And she has enlisted Jimmy to help her find this guy on a deadline. And that might be why she's hired him, because Jimmy is a man that no one else can see. But again, tough times, desperate measures. And actually, Jimmy's a pretty awesome guy. He's introduced her to a man named Ned Allen, who is a very normal guy on the rebound, has a little broken heart of his own. And together they are taking, although Ned doesn't know it, 5 steps to love. When we reach them in episode 7, we're on step 4. And there's 1 step left, and Ned, who's a custom office furniture designer, has flown off on a business trip, and he's out of the picture for a little while. Carolyn and Jimmy Foss have followed little Hans, who is a man who works with her parents' company, to a house concert, only to discover that her ex, William, who's a professional listener, an odd guy, not a normal guy, is the main performer. But when Carolyn, who does not play piano, performs a duet on the First Myers Baby Grand with Jimmy, her star rises too. And when Jimmy admires Carolyn's parents dancing the jitterbug to a waltz, there's some pretty unique characters, Carolyn decides to give Jimmy a very unique thank you gift. And this is where we catch up with Caroline and her outspoken intern from high school, Wendy, at her office at her company, True City Tours, in her apartment in Manhattan. Chapter 13. Carolyn and Wendy were sitting at their partner's desk at True City Tours. Technically, this was just Carolyn's desk pulled far enough away from the window that both she and Wendy could sit on one side of it. But it was a small change that made a huge difference in Carolyn's opinion of her office. True Cities Tour's new partner's desk reminded her of the kind of furniture you'd see in a black and white movie where the two sports writers swap bon mots across the grain. Now, let me repeat this assignment back to you, Wendy was saying, so I can be clear that you've lost your mind. You want me to help you find the family of a missing person you know who's not really missing? Carolyn nodded. A family this non-missing person has been avoiding, Wendy said. More or less, Carolyn said. Okay, which is it? Wendy tapped her index finger on the desk. More or less. At that moment, Carolyn changed her opinion about the character of the desk. It was starting to look like the kind of no-nonsense furniture you'd see in a movie where the heroine gets interrogated by a bad cop under a solitary light bulb in a smoky room. Okay, Carolyn confessed. It's not more or less. That's the assignment. That's it exactly. Well, Wendy sat back in her seat and folded her hands. I gotta tell you, this makes my practical philosophy class look like a Saturday morning cartoon. And it violates every precept they taught us in ethics. We are entering a gray area, Carolyn admitted. But Jimmy Foss has been a really good friend to me. I really want to help him out. Wendy glared. You want to thank him for his friendship by reuniting him with his long-lost family, who may be lost for a very good reason, by the way, by surprise. Couldn't you just buy him a tie? He's got a closet full of ties, Carolyn shook her head. What he needs is a family. He thinks he doesn't want to see them, but that's only because he feels abandoned by them. He wants to get in touch with them, I can tell. If you'd seen the way he looked at my family last night, you'd agree. Wendy shook her head. Everyone looks at your family that way, she said. Most people's parents play by the rules, either that or they're a mess. My mom's a mess. My dad wants me to be a forensic accountant, like him, and my grandmother. But you won the ancestral lottery. Your parents are totally original. They're so cool. You can be anything you want to be, and your folks are going to be fine with it. Carolyn pointed to her office. They're not fine with this, she said. You're kidding, Wendy said. Look, my parents think I'm wasting the valuable education they gave me, Carolyn told Wendy. If I really cared about them, they think I'd get lost with them. But still, I'd be living on the opposite side of the world, and I'd be doing the exact opposite of what I'm doing now. Carolyn's company finds things. Her parents' company helps people get lost. It's actually called Let's Get Lost. They take people on vacation. People have no idea where they've been. Freaks Carolyn out. Whoa, Wendy said. It's like you're not an outcast. It's more like you're an incast in a family of outcasts. I hate to take sides, but I think that makes your parents even cooler in a way that's annoying for you, but really impressive to everybody else. And do you get that? Carolyn nodded. But listen, your situation colors your point of view, Wendy said. Objectively, you should be seeing this situation with Jimmy in black and white. And you can't, because you're involved. But I can. And here's what I'm seeing. Your friend Jimmy admires your parents, so you think he wants to see his parents. But is that what he needs? Or is that what you think he needs? We covered that concept last semester in psychology. It's called projection. You think you're being generous, but maybe you're just being selfish. It's hard to know. Carolyn considered this for a moment. All right, well, let's just remove me from the picture, she told Wendy. Let's look at Jimmy's situation as an Enid Hobbs story. Enid Hobbs' grave is Carolyn's favorite landmark in the city. Enid was a poet who was in love with an architect, and they almost realized their true love, but she died tragically. This was the 19th century. So we have her gravestone with a poem on it that Carolyn thinks is the best site in the city. Let's look at Jimmy's situation as an Enid Hobbs story. Jimmy, he's the architect. Jimmy is Enid. The architect is his family. Time is the ocean that's keeping them apart. Will they reconnect in time? The answer is yes, if we help. Wendy shook her head. The necklace of mismatched keys that she always wore around her neck jingled its signature tune, bright and charmingly pointed, like its owner. That, Wendy said, is a really imperfect analogy, but I believe that you really care about Jimmy Foss. So I guess that's what matters. Wendy swiveled Carolyn's computer screen to her side of the desk. I gotta be honest. The chances of finding Jimmy's family are pretty needle in a haystacky, but if we don't find his family, there's good news. We won't have to cross the ethical bridge about reuniting them. Wendy smiled. You're not the only one around here who's good with bad grammar, she said, as she logged onto the city's Department of Revenue, Taxation, and Finance. Now, Jimmy had told Carolyn that his parents had been divorced 15 years earlier. He had told her that he had an older brother and a younger sister, and they were all living in Hoboken, at least they had been, when he disappeared. Carolyn studied the computer screen as Wendy began to scan the page. Why are we starting here? She asked. Folks don't hide their relatives when they can deduct them, Wendy said. It's basic math. But Wendy looked, and she couldn't find a family named Foss that matched Jimmy's description of his family in the records of the city. Sounds like a dead end, Carolyn said. Yes and no. Wendy rubbed her eyes. Most numbers, they don't lie, but people do. You think Jimmy Foss lied about his family? Carolyn's heart sank. She could find anything that existed, but if Jimmy Foss's family didn't exist, well, they'd never find them. No, Wendy said, I think he lied about his name. She opened another website. That complicates things. It does, to some degree, but it shrinks the haystack. You are incredible, Carolyn said. It's just demographics, Wendy said. Look at it this way. The number of people in any population is a specific number. You have 12 million people in New York City. You have 360 million people in the United States. Now, you can subdivide that number in any number of ways, depending on the kind of person you're studying. Like women over 30, under 6 feet tall. Or men born in New Jersey. These are categories, and they're pretty solid categories too, but people's names? That's another story. Names can change or get changed. Someone gets married, they change their name. Someone gets divorced, they change their name. Someone gets gender reassignment surgery, like my dad's stepbrother Grace. I've always liked that name, Carolyn said. It suits her, Wendy agreed. But here's the interesting thing. People change their names in different ways. People who want to shape their future, well, they'll change their first name. People who feel wounded by their past are more likely to change their surname. It's like they're writing their own history, starting with a new main character. That sounds like Jimmy, Carolyn said. All right then. Wendy selected chart, insert chart on her computer screen. A blank grid appeared. We need to find Jimmy's family's real surname. Then we can figure out who they are, and then we can figure out how to find them. Now, we have two possibilities. Wendy highlighted the first column on the chart. Possibility 1. Jimmy Foss created a last name for himself with no relationship to his family's last name. In that case, we're screwed. Wendy pressed delete column. The second possibility, Jimmy Foss modified his family's surname to create a surname of his own that's kind of like and yet different from his family's name. I think I like option 2, Carolyn said. Me too, said Wendy. Okay, so our next step is to play a game of word Scrabble. We want to figure out what Jimmy's original family name is. Now to do that, we could rearrange the letters in the last name he's using now, Foss, F-O-S-S. Wendy typed the combinations of those letters on the screen. O-S-F-S, Osfus. O-S-S-F, Osfu. S-S-S-O, Fasu. S-F-O-S. None of them really looked like a last name. What do we do now? Carolyn said. We keep the last 3 letters. We keep O-S-S, and we'll just try out a new first letter. That sounds like a good idea, Carolyn said. So they decided to start with the letter A and work their way through the alphabet. Eos, Wendy said, studying the result of adding A to O-S-S. Yeah, a smart kid would change that name in a second. They looked it up. But there were no families named Eos in Hoboken that matched Jimmy's family makeup or time frame. So they swapped the A for a B, and they got Boss. Wendy shook her head. No Jersey kid in his right mind would change a last name like the Boss, Wendy said. And sure enough, they searched it, but there were no matches. C, D, E, G, nothing. H, J, L, loss? Now that would be ironic, Wendy said. A kid named Lost who gets lost? They searched it. It didn't work. There were a lot of Mosses, but none of them matched the description of Jimmy's family. N, O, P, Q, and then they got to the letter R. Ross. Maureen and Tom Ross of Hoboken, New Jersey, had separated 15 years earlier. They had a daughter who was the age of Jimmy's sister and 2 sons, one of whom had been reported missing the year that Jimmy had left or disappeared from home. It's them. It's gotta be them, Carolyn said. God, I'd turn this in for extra credit, Wendy said, but I'd get expelled. For what? Carolyn asked. Let's just say all the records we're accessing aren't exactly open to the public, technically, Wendy said. But I'm pretty sure I covered our tracks. She shrugged. The necklace of mismatched keys jingled. Okay, Carolyn said. We've found Jimmy's family. Now, I just have to reunite them. All right, how? What brings families together? Weddings, funerals, christenings, graduations, Wendy began. Or you could offer them a prize. We learned that in marketing class. You want someone to do something? Give them something. People are suckers for giveaways. Carolyn thought about that idea. Okay, I'll give them a tour, she said. A Ross-related tour. That's a good idea, Wendy said. Tell them they won it in a random drawing. People are suckers for good luck. Well, how do I invite them? Carolyn said. I can't just call up a bunch of strangers and tell them a bunch of lies out of the blue and expect them to show up somewhere. Of course you can, Wendy said. Keep your sentences short and be really specific about the details. They'll believe anything you tell them. Carolyn looked at her intern. Did you learn to lie in marketing class too? Oh no, I learned that by being 16, Wendy said. And this is the song that goes with this section of our story, and it's called Uh-huh. She's staying in. I found a 6-toed sock and a half-knit sweater, but I've got something that'll fit you better. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I dunked 3 dozen donuts in a barrel of beer, but I've got something that'll keep you here. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Made to order, family size, got your nose and both your eyes. Sounds like you when it starts talking, makes me a laugh when we go a walking. I could paint you a picture, but I'm bad with a brush. Write you a scripture, I'm a saint in a rush. I could build you a boxcar, I a ticket to Spain, read your postcards from Paris, your letters from Spain. Made to order, family size, got your nose and both your eyes. Sounds like you when it starts talking, makes me a laugh when we go a walking. Write you a sonnet, hang your sheets on the line, be in your bonnet, sun in your shine. I could slide on your sidewalk, hop in your scotch, jitter your bug, double your touch. But a present ain't a present till you give it away. Tomorrow's to borrow, how about today? Made to order, family size, got your nose and both your eyes. Sounds like you when it starts talking, makes me laugh when we go a walking. you. So that's sort of Carolyn's state of mind. She figures she's got this great idea. She's going to give this guy a tour. Pull up a chair or some lawn. We like dogs. Hi. So Carolyn's going to give Jimmy Foss this tour, his family his tour, and she's going to do a little surprise family reunion. Everything went smoothly from there after Wendy told Carolyn to lie. Maureen Ross's number was listed in the Hoboken phone book. Wow, I'm a winner? She said when Carolyn told her what she'd won, a Ross-related tour of Manhattan for herself and her family. I never win anything. This is great. When does this tour take place? Day after tomorrow, Carolyn said. It's a promotional offer, so time is limited. Short sentences, specific details. Wendy was a genius. Oh, well, that is quick, Maureen Ross said, but I think we can manage it. I mean, it's free, right? You won't try to sell us life insurance or a timeshare or anything at the end? No, it's 100% free. And it's open to your entire immediate family, Carolyn said. You can bring your husband and your kids, and your kids' kids even. There was a pause. Mr. Ross and I, we're divorced, Maureen Ross said. The only place I'd like to invite him is back to court for a larger settlement. My daughter and her kids, my grandkids, I think they'll come out for this. Oh, and one of my sons. Maureen Ross sighed a camus. It's the sigh that Catan, the taxi driver and psychologist, who's a character we met earlier, would have interpreted as a sigh of why, usually provoked by something that someone's done in your family. Carolyn didn't want to ask, but she had to ask. She couldn't resist asking. Well, how many sons do you have? 2, Maureen Ross replied. The older one lives nearby. I haven't seen my younger son in 15 years. Oh, and I'm going to see him again. I know that. I know that in my heart. You know, a mother knows. You know, I think you're right about that, Carolyn said. You sound like a very nice young woman, Jimmy Foss's mother said. Are you a mother as well? Not yet, Carolyn said. But I think I'd like to be someday. Now, Carolyn had 2 days to organize a tour of Ross-related sites. And it turned out to be a really fun and interesting task. She liked an assignment that was unusual. She loved to work on a deadline. She started with the Manhattan Yellow Pages, where she found a butcher to the stars named Ross and Sons. Now, Ross and Sons was famous for treating its 4-star clientele like so much chopped meat. You think you're prime? Get in line, was the company motto. That's what the sign over the counter read. Then she found a double Dutch jump rope competition called Carross that the family could attend. I wouldn't mind going to that, Wendy said, as Carolyn added this item to the Ross's itinerary. Any sport without a goal is my kind of game. The last stop on the tour was going to be the Great Lawn at Central Park. This is where Diana Ross sang to an audience of thousands in the 1980s. And 2 days flew by, and now it was the day of the tour. Carolyn had met the Rosses at the PATH train, which commutes, from New Jersey back to the city. She'd taken them from Ross and Sons to Carross competition, and now they were gathered on the Great Lawn of Central Park, waiting to see the last sight of the day. Now, Carolyn had invited the Rosses on this tour, as we know, for a very sneaky reason. She was going to reunite them with their son and their brother, Jimmy, on the lawn. But she was genuinely enjoying their company. And the more time she spent with them, the more she liked them. Jimmy's family was a lively bunch. The kids liked to spin in circles and dig up rocks, where available. The adults liked to hold several conversations at once. So this is the place where Diana Ross sang, Jimmy's sister Maud was saying. Would you look at this weather? His mother, Maureen, was saying. Not a cloud in the sky. Carolyn was multitasking too. She was telling the Rosses about the history of Central Park, and she was keeping an eye out for Jimmy on the path. She'd gotten him to meet her in Central Park the same way she's gotten to his family to show up for the tour. She'd lied to him. It was such a nice day for a walk in the park, she said, and maybe they could talk about the 4th and half step to love. Ned was in Illinois attending a roundtable conference. It was the perfect time to review what she and Jimmy had accomplished to this point and what maybe she should do next. I mean, time was running out. There is no 4th and half step to love, Toots, Jimmy Foss had said. But sure, why not? Let's take a walk in the park. Anything for you. And now, here he was, riding the blue tandem bicycle that Carolyn had given him as a thank you gift after he'd helped her take the leap at the black tie party that had led to her taking the 3rd step to love with Ned Allen in a previous episode. Carolyn could see Jimmy sitting in the front seat, but the bike must have looked riderless to the rest of the world. Remember, only she can see him. Carolyn thought back to the bike ride that she and Jimmy had taken in Hoboken together. People had stared as they'd ridden by with Carolyn in the back seat and Jimmy steering, present yet unseen, in the front seat. "You go, girl, riding all hands free in the back like that," someone had shouted. Carolyn smiled at the memory. But Jimmy didn't really have to worry about people shouting things at him as he rode the blue tandem bike, the seemingly unpiloted bike, through Central Park. The park was a judgment-free zone. People disco roller skated here. They got married by mail-order clergy here. They cross-dressed or undressed and sunbathed on the beach, although there was no beach, on a blanket on the lawn 100 miles from the ocean. A riderless bicycle in Central Park was really no big deal, and if anyone saw it, as far as Carolyn could tell, no one seemed to care. "Hey, Toots, I know what you said. Let's take a walk," Jimmy Foss said as he drove up, "but I thought we could go for a..." He stopped and stared at the family on the lawn. "Where did they come from?" "They're your present," Carolyn said. "Look, it wasn't easy, but I found them. I wanted to thank you for everything you've done, and when I saw the way you looked at my family the other night, I thought you were craving a little time with your family, so I did what you do. I took a leap, and now I'm giving you a little push, the same way you push other people into good things, and you know that always works out right. So come on, go on, say hi." Jimmy Foss stared at Carolyn. For the first time since she'd known him, he didn't say a thing. "Oh, come on," Carolyn said. "You can do it." Jimmy Foss ran his fingers through his hair. And how do you propose that I say hello, Toots? They can't see me, remember?" "Oh, I know, but, I mean..." The truth was, Carolyn hadn't really planned out this part of the reunion. She had believed in some irrational yet really hopeful way that if she brought everyone together and created a really interesting tour, that Jimmy and his family would put aside their differences and reunite somehow. How? She didn't know. Clearly that idea wasn't working. It was time for some kind of plan B. She thought fast. Okay. I can introduce you to your family," she told Jimmy Foss, "just like I introduced you to my parents. That went really well." Carolyn's parents were really impressed that she had an invisible friend. They felt it was marking a step up in her social development. She wasn't being so rigid and so square. "All you have to do to take the leap," Carolyn told Jimmy Foss. "You take the leap, I'll do the rest. What do you say? Your mother wants to see you again. She told me." "Sorry, Toots. I can't." Jimmy Foss hopped on the bike and rode away. "Wait!" Carolyn called after him. But Jimmy was riding so fast, all she could see was the blue streak of the tandem bicycle, disappearing around a bend in the park's central path. "Hey, so where'd they put Diana Ross's stage?" Jimmy Foss's brother was asking Carolyn. Well, you know, that's a great question," Carolyn said, and she led Jimmy's family deeper onto the green. "I blew it," Carolyn thought, later that day when she said goodbye to the Rosses. "Where did I go wrong?" Everywhere," Wendy said when Carolyn got back to their office. "I don't want to say I told you so, but..." Carolyn was pacing the room. "Okay, maybe it isn't what I did. Maybe it's the way I said it?" Wendy didn't answer, but her necklace of mismatched keys jingled its verdict as she shook her head. Not a chance. At 6 o'clock, Wendy headed home for the night. Carolyn left soon after that. It was a drink and think night at the Emerald Tavern. And drink and think is it's a monthly event that happens at the local bar, where Carolyn's dear friend Reverend Evans and his other friend, a priest and a rabbi, priest and a minister, get together and do a little philosophy over some booze. Tonight's big question was, what gives? Roger, the bartender, had drawn the short straw, and so he asked his question first to his neighbor at the tavern's big back table, where Reverend Evans and his friends gathered to ponder and wonder and drink. "What gives with the news these days?" he asked Mary Kate Johansson, the performance artist. "What doesn't give?" she answered, downing a tequila shot. The Rev, the Reb, and Father Ted parried and challenged one another with variations on the night's theme. What gives? What gives? Carolyn listened in, but her mind kept replaying the scene in the park. If Jimmy Foss had just taken the lead, everything would have been fine, she told herself. What gives with Jimmy Foss? She thought, riffing on the night's question. He'd been bossing her around for weeks now, and every time he dared her to do something, I mean, it'd been scary, but she'd done it. He dared her to ask Ned Allen on a date, and she did it. He dared her to give something that didn't exist to Ned until he took it, and she did that too. He had told her to take a leap and crash an invitation-only society-page party. That had been the hardest thing to do so far. She remembered how scared she'd felt, standing on the stairs of that fancy building, looking into the ballroom. And then she listened to Jimmy. She took the leap, and things had only gotten better from there. She'd made a bunch of new friends. I mean, one of them was a countess. But now, when the tables were turned, big Jimmy Foss fled the scene. What a hypocrite. Carolyn sighed a Camus, a sigh of why. What gives with me, she wondered. She had pictured Jimmy and his family falling into one another's arms as much as they could given his situation. Instead, he'd biked away, and his family had gone home. They were happy with their tour, but they'd missed the main site. She'd done her part, and he had bailed. What gives? Well, Drink and Think was over by then. Carolyn went home. Her parents were getting lost somewhere. Miss Chupesky and little Hans were out at a party. Ned was out of town. She called, she emailed, but apparently Jimmy Foss wanted to be out of touch. Carolyn woke at dawn the next morning. Her parents were asleep in their bedroom. She could tell because they'd hung their knapsacks reassuringly on her bedroom door. And Miss Chupesky and little Hans were asleep on her couch. Everyone was in their proper place. She felt okay. And then she remembered Jimmy and Central Park. She emailed Jimmy. The message bounced back. She called him. The phone was disconnected. Carolyn's phone rang as she was racing out the door. "Hey, Kara, want to grab an early breakfast?" her best friend Aggie said. "How about an early ride to Hoboken?" Carolyn suggested. All right, so we are back. So Aggie, who is Carolyn's best friend, Aggie is a mosaic artist. They met in high school math class. They're both very smart girls. They were a little bit outcast in high school, but when they put their amazing powers together, Carolyn's ability to find stuff, Aggie's great vision, and also belief that her friends rocked and she didn't care what anybody thought, they were transformed into super cool teens, and now they're in their almost, in their early 30s, and they're living in New York together. So Aggie's called Carolyn to have breakfast and ends up taking this ride to Hoboken. Aggie has heard about Carolyn's quest to find this true love on a deadline thing using Euclid's proof of perfect numbers, and thinks she's a little nuts. But what Carolyn has said, Aggie, in the wake of Carolyn's breakup, has given her a beautiful mirror, a mosaic mirror that says, "You gotta believe." And she said, "Listen," shows her the mirror that she gave her and said, "You gotta believe. You gotta give me 2 months. Trust me, I'm gonna find the world's most normal guy. And I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but in 2 months, I'm gonna be in love, and you'll see." So Aggie is now riding the ferry back to Hoboken with Carolyn, who has explained the situation, and she goes, "Okay, so after your big speech to me last month, oh, I'm done with odd guys, Aggie. Trust me, Aggie. I'm gonna find a normal guy, Aggie. You gotta believe. You've hooked up with some invisible guy from Hoboken?" Well, I'm not sure if this is an upgrade or an invitation for an intervention. Carolyn had been telling Aggie about Jimmy Foss on the ferry to Hoboken. "This isn't funny," Carolyn said. "Oh, I know," Aggie said, "but you have to admit that Jimmy makes William and the other one sound normal by comparison." "Yeah, but Jimmy's not my boyfriend," Carolyn told Aggie as the ferry docked. "He's my matchmaker. Ned's my boyfriend. I mean, we haven't said that formally, but we're one step from being in love, so how could he not be, you know?" "Whatever you say," Aggie said as Carolyn rang the bell outside Jimmy Foss's apartment building. She rang the buzzer. The buzzer clicked. The door opened. "Ooh, I'm sorry, maybe it was just a temporary power outage," Carolyn said as they walked up the 6 flights of stairs to Jimmy's apartment on the top floor. "Here we are." Carolyn knocked on Jimmy's door. "Coming!" A woman's voice called from inside the apartment. "Oh, that explains it," Carolyn whispered to Aggie. "His girlfriend is here." "He has a girlfriend?" Aggie said. "Oh, he's totally smitten with her," Carolyn whispered. "Just a sec," the voice said. "Well, she sounds friendly," Aggie said. "And she's got to be pretty," Carolyn said. "Only pretty women can see Jimmy." Talk about a good pickup line, Aggie said as the door swung open. Namaste. A tall man with a white blonde ponytail stepped out onto the landing and extended his hand. He wore a green peasant shirt and brown pants with an elastic waist and wide legs that made it appear he was wearing an ankle-length skirt. Is that Jimmy? Aggie asked Carolyn. He's taller than I expected. I'm Albert, the skirted man with the ponytail said, and this is my life partner, Elise. He pointed to a tiny woman standing beside him, so small that she almost fit under his arm. Did you, have trouble parking? Elise had a white blonde crew cut. She wore a tie-dyed halter over a pair of denim shorts. No, we took the ferry, Aggie said. You moved our furniture on a ferry? Elise said. What furniture? Carolyn asked. Elise, I don't believe these women are our movers, Albert said. And is that because they're women, Albert? Elise asked. That's kind of sexist, Al. Hey, I'm open to working with professional movers of all genders, Elise, Albert said. I don't think there are movers because they're wearing very nice-looking sundresses, and I don't think it's practical for anyone of any gender to move furniture in a sundress. You said movers? Are you moving in? Carolyn said. We signed a 5-year lease, Elise said. I'm sorry, this news seems to have made you, sad? Were you hoping to rent the place? It is very nice. Carolyn shook her head. A friend of mine used to live here. I didn't know he was leaving. Hey, maybe he's still there and they don't know it, Aggie whispered to Carolyn. What with his, and all. No, there's no one here but us, Albert said. That's what we think, Aggie whispered. But one thing you should know is that my friend Carolyn here, well, she has a lot of interesting friends. I'm proud to be one of them. But the interesting thing about the guy who lives here is that only she can see him. So, your friend's like a ghost? Elise said. That's cool. We lived with a ghost in Cali. It would finish the soy milk, but other than that, no problem. Jimmy's not a ghost, Carolyn said. He's a guy with, she searched for the right term, a visibility problem. Wow, you mean he's shy? I can relate to that, Albert said. He's not shy. Look, could I just look around a little bit? Carolyn pulled a business card from her wallet and handed it to Elise. Overlooked landmarks, Elise said. That is so unique. Carolyn nodded. Would you mind if I looked around? We're, environmental lawyers, Albert said. So many people overlook Mother Nature, I think we have something in common. Well, my boyfriend is chief arborist at the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, Aggie said. Elise said, I feel a synergy. Please feel free. Come in, look around. Carolyn opened the door that led to Jimmy's back room. Now, the back room of Jimmy's apartment used to be filled with so many unexpected things. Now, it was empty, except for the blue tandem bike in its back corner. You guys should have seen this place, Carolyn sighed, a sigh of why. There was a live lemon tree in the corner and these blue barn door shutters over the skylight. A lemon tree, Elise said, and a badminton court and a record player that only played Sinatra, Carolyn said. Jimmy had hundreds of records. He kept them in a bookcase that took up the whole back wall. Why did he leave the bicycle? Aggie asked. Carolyn shook her head. As she did, something caught her eye. It was a shiny black shard of something by the bike's front tire. She walked over and picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy. It was also lightly grooved. It's a piece of a phonograph record, she said. She thought back to the first night she visited Jimmy in his apartment. They had danced to the music playing on his stereo. To this record, quite possibly. When I'm happy, Toots, Jimmy had told her, I redecorate. When I'm sad, I move. He's gone. Jimmy sat down on the bare floor where Carolyn sat down on the bare floor where Jimmy's real grass lawn used to be. She stared at the empty space where Jimmy's column of Sinatra records used to be. She pressed the fragment of the record into her hands. She'd pushed him too far. If your friend owns this place, he must have left in, a hurry, Albert said. The ad we answered said to rent immediately, and we're both starting new jobs in the city this week, so the timing was, perfect. We had been staying in a hostel, Elise said. It was awesome in a communitarian kind of way, but kind of a bummer if you needed to shower, on a timeline. So naturally, we jumped at the chance to check out this place. Of course, we loved it. Who wouldn't, Aggie said. Do you see the skylight? Carolyn glared at her friend. Sorry, Caro. but real estate envy is a natural part of any New Yorker, Aggie said. It was awesome. I mean, we did the whole transaction online. We never actually spoke to the owner, Elise said, and he gave you a 5-year lease. Carolyn studied the room for anything she might have overlooked. With an option to buy, Albert said. The whole deal feels so like it was meant to be. I mean, it's like perfect. Carolyn sighed a sigh she'd never sighed before. It was as deep as the East River and almost as dark. Elise sat down on the floor by her feet. Okay, let's think this through. You said your friend worked from home, right? Well, maybe he took a job at one of his clients' companies. Lots of folks do that in our field. Most of his clients are overseas, Carolyn said. Well, maybe he just needs some time alone, Elise said. Looks like he's getting that, Aggie said. Oh, sorry, Carol. You know I haven't had my coffee yet. Would you guys like some chicory? Elise asked. Oh, no thank you, Aggie and Carolyn and Albert said in unison. Well, Carolyn echoed. There wasn't much more to say. I wish we could do more to, help, Albert said. But if we hear from your friend, his name's Jimmy Foss, Carolyn said, although he could be using the name Jimmy Ross by now, or really anything. Well, we promise if we hear from anything, we'll let you know. Albert tucked Carolyn's business card in his pants pocket. Carolyn tucked the piece of broken record shard into her satchel. Aggie's stomach rumbled. Sorry, Caro, she said, but I haven't had my breakfast either. Would you like to take the bicycle? Elise asked Carolyn. It's not ours, and it sounds like it's at least half yours. Thank you, Carolyn said. The bike wasn't Jimmy, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. Her train of thought derailed at that point. She hadn't had her breakfast either. Elise and Carolyn wheeled the tandem bike through Jimmy's office and out the front door of his apartment, onto the landing. As they stood there saying goodbye, Jimmy's neighbor, Mrs. Bustante, bounded up the stairs to the landing before them. Hello, dear, Jimmy's gray-haired neighbor said to Carolyn. It's lovely to see you again. The flowers have been lovely, and I wanted to thank you for the gift you left me last night. How did you know I liked lemons? Lemons? Aggie looked at Carolyn. Your friend here gives me the nicest gifts, Mrs. Bustante told Aggie. Come see, come see. She opened her door and waved the group inside. Oh, everyone said as they walked in. A lemon tree was standing by the living room window, glowing in the morning sun. That's Jimmy's tree, Carolyn whispered. Who's Jimmy? Mrs. Bustante said. Oh, your neighbor across the hall, Aggie said. Oh, but she's my neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Bustante said, pointing to Carolyn. Although we, live there now, Elise said. You do? Mrs. Bustante shook her head. Well, for now, Albert said, although who can tell what the future will bring? We're all merely seeds of possibility on a shifting plane of existence. What? Mrs. Bustante said. They're subletting, Carolyn said. Finally, Mrs. Bustante said. Someone who speaks my language. Are you sure you can't stay? I like you. Carolyn couldn't stay. She and Aggie and the blue tandem bicycle had to catch the next ferry home. And they did. Look, Caro, if Jimmy wants to be found, you'll find him, Aggie said, looking down at the water. But what if he wants to stay lost? Carolyn said. I'm good at finding things, but Jimmy Foss is great at hiding. We played chess once at his place, and you won, right? Aggie said. It was a draw. Well, at least you didn't lose. Aggie squeezed Carolyn's hand. But that was exactly what Carolyn was worried about. Sounds like he plays a good game, Aggie said, as the ferry pulled into the port on the Manhattan side. Aggie, you are a genius. Carolyn hugged her friend, nearly upsetting the bike. Jimmy Foss loves a good game. That's how I'm going to find him. Now, finding Jimmy was going to be as easy as playing chess, Carolyn told herself, as she rode the blue tandem bike back to her apartment. She was trying to overlook the fact that chess is an extremely complicated game, and she and Jimmy were tied when they played it. She had to anticipate his moves, she told herself, and she'd build a strategy around that. You'd like to conduct a follow-up interview about the tour with me in person? Jimmy's older sister Maud said when Carolyn phoned her from her office a few minutes later. Yeah, it's a customer service thing, Carolyn said. At True City Tours, we think of everyone we work with as family. Wow, Wendy was whispering across the partner's desk. You picked up on this line thing like a pro. If this tour business thing fails, you could do infomercials. I mean, seriously, I'd buy a pocket fishing knife or a set of car cloths from you. You're good. Well, Okay, I guess that would be fine, Maud Ross was saying. My kids are in school for another hour, if you want to stop by now. Maud Ross lived in Lower Manhattan, less than a mile south from Carolyn's apartment. Would you like some lemonade? She asked Carolyn. It's a family recipe. God, did I say something wrong? Are you allergic to lemons? No, I'd love some, Carolyn said, taking a seat at Maud's kitchen table. She'd just been thinking about the family resemblance. Every time she'd gone to Jimmy Foss's apartment in Hoboken, he'd offer her lemonade. She pulled out a notebook, pulled the cap off her pen. Lying, with props. Wendy would be proud. So, how did you, rate your experience with True City Tours, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being dissatisfied and 5 being highly satisfied? She asked Maud as she sipped her drink. I don't know. I guess I'd give it a 5, Maud said. I'm not one of those people who gives a standing ovation, all the time, but your tour was really nice. And the places you showed us were interesting, and let's not forget it was free. And it was good to get the whole family together. Carolyn took a breath. She didn't want to bring up painful memories, but she really didn't have a choice. About your family, she said. I met your older brother on the tour, but I was wondering. And she paused. In chess, you planned your moves several steps ahead based on what your opponent was likely to do, but Maud wasn't her opponent. Do you have a younger brother named Jimmy? She blurted out. Why do you ask? Maud Ross put down her lemonade. Because I think I've met him too. Oh, you better be telling the truth. Are you sure? Well, Carolyn said, I can tell you what I know. She told Maud Ross how she'd met Jimmy Foss while she was researching a new landmark for her Bank Suisse tour. She described how he looked, how he spoke, and how he'd pushed people together on the dance floor of the club where they'd met. Maud Ross shook her head. Shh, the Cupid thing. He's been doing that ever since he was a kid. You want to see something cute? She walked over to a roll-top desk in the corner of the kitchen and pulled out a scrapbook. See that? Maud showed Carolyn a photograph of a young boy in a Boy Scout uniform. He was grinning an impish-looking grin. His nose was bruised. He got the first sock in the nose that year for pushing 2 kids together, she said. Frankie Z and Judy Costello Z. Of course, she was only Judy Costello then. He pushed them together in elementary school, and they're still together? Carolyn asked. Ever since 3rd grade, Maureen Ross said. I should have Jimmy do something like that for me. He's a pushy guy, but he's got a gift. I agree, Carolyn said. So where's he living? Jimmy's sister asked. He had this pretty incredible apartment in Hoboken when I met him, but let me guess. Maud said. He ran off. That's another one of my brother's trademark moves. He's a sensitive guy. He sees more, he hears more, he feels more than the average person, and he's smart too. So he thinks about stuff a lot, maybe too much. Plus, in case you didn't notice, he's got some serious pride. I noticed that too, Carolyn smiled. When we were kids, I bet Jimmy about something. Who remembers what? He lost the bet. I called him a loser, and boom, he disappeared. Who knows where? My parents were going crazy. I need to find my younger brother before my other brother tells my folks that Jimmy's AWOL because of me, which isn't technically true, but you know how families are. So I look and I look. I find him. At dinner time, kid never misses a meal. He's up a tree in the neighbor's yard watching television through their living room window, eating a pizza. I'm not saying he's up a tree now, Maud Ross continued. I wish he were, Carolyn said. I've got some good connections in the tree world. But you've seen Jimmy. That's something. Is he healthy? Does he have a good job? Is he married? Carolyn nodded yes, then no. What was I thinking? Of course he's not married, Maud Ross said, looking at Carolyn's ring finger. Oh, no, Carolyn said. We're just friends. But I owe him a lot, and I want to apologize to him. I think I pushed him too far. Maud Ross nodded. My brother's pride, that's his biggest weakness, if you ask me. The guys in my family act tough, but they're softies. Sorry. Maud wiped her eyes on her sleeve. You found my little brother once. Do you think you can find him again? Carolyn shrugged. I want to. Here. Maud handed Carolyn the photograph of Jimmy as a bruised-nosed Boy Scout. Now, I'd like to keep my mother out of this, she said, but maybe my brother Lucas can help. Maureen picked up the phone and dialed. Oh, come on, Lou. She said, how much time could it take? Talk to the woman for 5 minutes, and then you can hit the races. She knows you're a busy guy. Yes, she's coming over. Yes, right now. Yes, she's trying to help, okay? So be nice. And if you can't be nice, be polite. Yeah, that's like nice without the nice, okay? Bye. Maud handed Carolyn a sticky note with an address on it. The address was only a few blocks away. Like I said, the Ross men are softies. You just have to ignore the bluster. And that's where we end for tonight. Episode 7 of Blame It on Hoboken. Play our theme song. Well, thank you. The imaginary credits will roll. Thank you again. See you next week. Sharon Glassman live on the Momo Maes Bakery. See us on Facebook. Catch you in a week. Blame it on the season. Ooh, that's interesting. Blame it on the season. Blame it on the weather. Oh, blame it for no reason. On a feather, you can blame it on Hoboken. But baby, stay with me. You can blame it on the game. Blame it on the batter. Oh, blame it on my name. It doesn't matter, you can blame it on Hoboken. But baby, stay with me. The magic kicks off Saturday night when your ferry pulls in from Brooklyn Heights. Oh, the gangplank's down, the love bug bites, the skyline spells forever. As long as we're together, you can blame it on a fish, blame it on the ocean, oh, blame it on this kiss. If you get the notion, you can blame it on Hoboken. But baby, stay with, blame it on Hoboken. But baby, stay with, blame it but don't tame it. Write our names and flame with it. No 2 days the same on it. Stake a claim for fame on it. Blame it on Hoboken. But baby, stay with me.